part of the oral history project for the 50th anniversary. I'm Carol Cole from the Social Science Department, and camera work is done by Mark Gaynor. And it's an interview of the college president. I'll turn it over now. Can you give us your name?
I'm Allan Hershfield, the president of the Fashion Institute of Technology, and I've been here for 2.5 years.
And what's your impressions of FIT in the time that you've been here?
Well, I think what I have to say is, since most of my, in fact, all of my experience prior to coming to FIT has been in what I would describe as very traditional institutions of higher education, generally research universities. There is an enormous contrast between what they do and what FIT does. And what's interesting to me is that 3 years ago, before I knew anything about FIT, if someone would have described FIT to me, I would have kind of poo-pooed it all, and I would have kind of let it all off as a trade school. But having come down here and seen the way the institution operates, I can't tell you how enthused I am about the mission of FIT and the way that mission is carried out. It makes FIT certainly unusual and perhaps unique in American higher education. Let me describe some of the differences. And I have to start first with FIT's mission, which can be put in one sentence. The mission of FIT is to educate students for careers and for work. That distinguishes it from most colleges and universities, because most colleges and universities see their fundamental role as standing apart from society so that they can critique it. And while they may have placement offices, they do not feel necessarily a responsibility to educate students for work unless the students are in particular professional programs like medicine or law. And even there, the act of getting a job is much more up to the student than it is to the institution. So that whole focus on educating students for work is really what makes FIT very special, and then a whole series of things flow from that. First of all, we have very close ties with all of the industries we serve. Almost all of our majors directly relate to specific industries in which there is a continuing need for professionally educated personnel. And we are one of the major suppliers of those personnel. And people generally like our graduates because they know that they will be valuable as employees from the first day on the job. So that's one of the things that distinguishes FIT. We have 26 majors at the moment, and as I say, each one of them relates to an industry. I think there's one exception to that, and there's one fine arts major or illustration that where there are no particular jobs available, generally speaking, and the students know that when they go into it, they know they're going to be freelancers. But apart from that, the other thing is that we take placement very seriously, and we routinely place between 85 and 95% of our associate and bachelor's degree graduates who are available for placement. Now, some of them aren't available for placement. And generally, good career ladder jobs. They're not dead-end jobs. And they range all the way from manufacturing management, where we now have 4 or 5 job offers for every graduate, and starting salaries range from $25,000 to $45,000 a year, to toy design, where all the graduates are generally placed before graduation. And again, the salaries range from $27,000 to $35,000 a year, to fashion buying and merchandising, and to fashion design, where the salaries are a little lower, but again, we're placing all of our students, and they have a great career paths. There's hardly an industry in this city that relates to design or business that you won't find senior people who've been educated at FIT generally doing a good job. So that's another thing that makes the institution very unusual. And there are a couple of other distinguishing characteristics that I think one needs to talk about, all again a product of this special mission. Because we are so committed to educating students for work, we attract students who generally know what they want to do, and they are committed to becoming whatever it is they're studying. And the way the curriculum is structured facilitates that, because unlike most of the other institutions at which I've been, students start at FIT and are in their majors right away. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't get a liberal arts education. because we certainly believe that the liberal arts are a very important part of all of our students' education. As a matter of fact, we say quite frequently that the higher up they go in management, the more important the liberal arts will be. But the key thing here is that the liberal arts are preparing these students for management. At the same time, the students are enrolled in the areas in which they wish to specialize. And that means that they tend to get hooked. And therefore, we have the highest retention rate in the SUNY system for full-time students. Some 67% who start here complete their associate or bachelor's degrees within 2 or 5 years. And that's a very remarkable achievement. That's another distinguishing characteristic of the institution. And I think I need to say something more about the fact that every one of our departments has an industry advisory council. Some of them are much more active than others, but all of them perform certain key functions for the college, which help tie us to the industry. First of all, they help us keep the curriculum up to date. Second, they help us identify part-time faculty who can teach for us, who have professional credentials. And in a city like New York, which is just rich with part-time faculty, we have some wonderful part-time faculty teaching for us as a result of those connections. In addition to all of that, they help us find internships for our students, they help us place our students, and some of them are very active in helping to raise money for the college. For example, the Fragrance Foundation, or Fragrance Action Council, which is the advisory council to our cosmetics and fragrances program, just recently raised $100,000 to help us equip the first fragrance laboratory in a college or university anywhere in the United States, or for that matter, as far as we know, in the world. The toy industry has been very generous in providing scholarship money and money for equipment and money for a variety of things to our toy design program. And these are all things that you just don't find in what I would call more traditional institutions of higher education. In fact, if I were to return as a political science professor, which was the discipline that I studied, to a traditional college or university, there's much that I would take back from FIT and try to get started in these institutions. So there's a lot about FIT that is absolutely remarkable. And then the final thing, I think, that is the best part of FIT is the kind of students we attract are so goal-oriented and so committed that they work very hard. 75% of our full-time daytime students are receiving some form of financial aid. I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and work out, and quite frequently there are students downstairs working on their projects. So it's really a wonderful institution.
Could you also talk about FIT in relationship to the city?
Oh, yes. Well, of course, because we play such a key role in serving all of these industries, we're vital to the economic development of the city. The apparel industry, of course, is only one example, and I will use that. The apparel industry is worth $14 billion a year to this city in economic activity. It is the largest manufacturing segment left in the city. Finance is actually larger from an economic point of view than apparel, but we are the largest manufacturing units left in the city. And the apparel industry now employs more than 84,000 people. There are 4,000 contractors still producing apparel in this city. Many people don't realize that. And of the 84,000 people in the industry, some 64% are Asian and Hispanic females, most of whom do not speak English very well. So the social cost to this city of this industry failing would be extraordinary. These people would have to find something else to do, and they do what they're doing very well. Now, I can relate this particular subject to one of our programs. We have a program in pattern making technology in which we have 2,500 students enrolled. And this is a remarkable major because that's an associate degree program. And many of the students come right out of the garment industry. They're sewers and other people. And the reason there are so many students involved is that a good pattern maker is worth his or her weight in gold. A really fine pattern maker can command a salary of over $200,000 a year, But routinely, good pattern makers that we produce are being employed for $35,000 or $45,000 a year. And this is a wonderful bootstrap program because you see these little Asian ladies and men who have been in the garment industry working for $5, $6, $7, $8 an hour come here, and we've offered the introductory course in this program in 11 languages, including Mandarin, Chinese, and Serbo-Croatian. We routinely teach it in Greek. Now, while the students are taking the initial course in their mother tongue, they're also taking English as a second language so that they will be able to benefit from the follow-on courses. And to go out in the industry and see these people who really made it up there is just a very satisfying experience, and is a classic example of how the college helps the industry. But we help the industries in a variety of ways. A continuing flow of designers is absolutely essential to all of the design industries we serve, whether it's illustration, magazine publishing, fashion design, right down the list. And we're producing those people. There must be new ideas, and they come online all the time. In addition to that, we offer a series of what I would call continuing education or extension services that are designed to help the industry. We have downstairs the only quick response laboratory and unit production system that I am aware of in the United States that is readily available for workshops and seminars to help industry people and retailers, I'm talking about manufacturers and retailers, learn how important this new system is to them, and also learn how to put together such a system, how to operate it, and what kinds of equipment to buy. Likewise, the fragrance laboratory is used by people in the fragrance industry. And I could go over major by major and demonstrate how in every case, our interior design faculty, for example, were instrumental in helping to work with the state to develop the new licensing requirements for interior designers. And so our faculty are active in the industry, they're active professionally, and we just do a great deal. We have plans to do even more. One of my goals is to create a design incubator as part of a new building into which we will take 20 to 30 new young design firms, provide them with slightly below, space at slightly below market rates. We will then provide them with a range of services for which they will pay. Credit, business planning, how to find mills that will do short runs for them, a variety of things upon which young design firms need help. We'll keep them from 3 to 5 years. We'll take some kind of an equity position, and then they will graduate, so to speak. But most important, we will make connections between each of these design firms and clothing manufacturers in the city, so that should help create and retain jobs in the city. And we see this as part of a much larger building that we hope will also contain a new exposition facility in which fashion shows can be done for the first time in a good way in the city. As you probably know, right now, fashion shows are conducted in tents on 7th and 6th Avenue. There is no facility in the city that rivals those that are available in Paris and elsewhere. And this facility will be available not only for fashion shows that will help support the design industry in the city, but it will also be available for other industries and for other things that FIT wants to do. It will be a very flexible facility. So that's another way we're thinking of helping the city. And we, as part of the design incubator, we're also going to buy into the Made in New York label. We will try to help and push that project, which has been really started by members of the Greater Blouse Association and also Bud Conheim, who is the president of Nicole Miller. So those are just a few of the ways in which we relate to industry.
And how do we relate to the rest of the SUNY system?
Well, we are one of 30 community colleges. That's rather strange since we offer both bachelor's and master's degrees. But we were initially created as a community college. And the legislation which gave us the right to award bachelor's and master's degrees clearly states that we are still a community college. And that makes us, there are 64 units in the SUNY system. 30 of those are community colleges, and 34 are what are called state-operated campuses. The difference between a state-operated campus and a community college is that state-operated campuses receive 100% of their funding from the state, and they're under much more, I would say, stressful and severe state controls. For example, when one of them wants to start a new academic program, they not only have to get it approved academically, but they have to submit a budget request, which may or may not be approved. Community colleges, while they're under the general supervision of the trustees of SUNY, each has its own locally appointed board of trustees. Four are appointed by the governor and 5 by the sponsoring agency, in our case the Board of Education. And this board really has the legal and fiduciary responsibility for the college. And because of that, we have some very illustrious people on our Board of Trustees who help us relate to industries. For example, Jay Mazer, who is the president of the ILGWU, is one of our trustees. Has been very helpful in a variety of ways. Andrea Jung, the vice president for product development for North America of Avon. Jeff Banks, a major designer. George Kaufman, who is a major real estate broker and been a big help. And I could go on and on. Of course, Peter Scotese, who is the chair of the Board of Trustees and has been an extraordinary help to me and has made contributions to this college that cannot be described, so valuable, was the former chief executive of Springs Mills and has been a real help to us. So we have very illustrious members of the Board of Trustees, and that distinguishes us. And one of the points I started to make about budget is that unlike SUNY, when we want to start a new program, which usually results from some impetus from an industry, the industry typically provides the money for planning. And then we simply get the program approved, and once it's approved, the money comes automatically from the state based on the number of students that arrive. And one of the real advantages to that, for this, is with the toy design program, as an example. About 6 or 7 years ago, people in the toy industry came to the college and said, look, it's now time for us to get professionally educated designers. We want you to help us put together a program that will give us professionally trained designers that we can employ. And we said, fine, you put up the money to help plan the program, help us initially hire the faculty. And they did that. I think they put up somewhere between $200,000 and $250,000. And then when the first students arrived, the state automatically funded the program. So that makes it, that particular status that we have as being part of SUNY, but also being a community college with a local sponsor, gives us much more flexibility, and that makes it much easier for us to help meet the needs of industry, to move more quickly and to move more effectively. And that's another thing that we certainly would never want to give up.
Would you like to discuss the role of the foundation, the educational foundation?
Yes, I'll talk about the foundation. Actually, the foundation is very unusual. The foundation actually predated the college, and as you may know, the foundation came into being when members of the senior leaders in the apparel industry in New York in 1944 were very, very concerned that they didn't have any successor generation to replace them. All the young men were off fighting the war, and all the women had replaced the men in the factories, and their children had gone to Harvard and Yale and other places and didn't want to go into the garment industry. So they went to the Board of Education, these leaders, Morris Haft was one of them, and a whole group of others, and said, look, we need professionally educated people for this industry. At that time, there were more than 500,000 jobs in the industry in New York. And so they then set up the Educational Foundation for the Fashion Industries and got a license or certificate from the Board of Education to set up, initially I think on an experimental basis, a program which was post-high school and had 2 majors. One was design and the other was scientific management. And they started with 100 students in the rented quarters in the Fashion High School. And the foundation then, at that time, and if you look at the foundation's charter, you find that the members of the foundation agreed to make up any shortfall in public funds on the part of the operating budget of the college. I am from time to time tempted with the idea of reminding the current foundation members of that obligation. But at any rate, they played a key role in the development of the college and have continued to do so, particularly in the area of raising money for scholarships. Right now, the foundation routinely provides us with somewhere between $1.3 and $1.4 million a year for scholarships. The major fundraising activity is the annual dinner dance. And this year, I might add, as a part of our 50th anniversary celebration, we netted more than $1 million out of that dance for the first time in the history of the college. It was by far the most successful event that we've ever had. And I should also add, we had an alumni star salute, which was the best that we've ever had this year. In fact, several people said to me, it was a wonderful event even if we didn't raise any money, but we netted more than $25,000 from that event, which is far more than we've ever had before. And likewise, our alumni auction, which was held earlier this year, we netted somewhere between $25,000 and $30,000 for, and the previous year I think we'd netted about $1,300. So there's been an enormous improvement in what goes on. The foundation board now includes about 72 people, some of the most illustrious people in all of the industries we serve. We have the CEOs or senior officers of almost every single major retailer in the city on the board of our foundation. We can use them to open doors for us, to help get things done for students. In fact, I can now make contact with the heads of Bloomingdale's or Saks and get some of our students' products considered where they might not have been considered before. So that the foundation has played a very important role, and we're going to look to it to play an even more important role, because fundraising is now much more important to the college than it was even 6 or 7 years ago. Because of repeated budget cuts, we simply must raise money to acquire the new equipment we need to keep our faculty and students up to date, to provide training for them, for travel money, and we need we're going to need private money for this new building, although most of the money that goes into it will be public. So the foundation plays a key role.
Okay. Would you like to discuss the role of the college with the state and the legislature?
Well, clearly we draw students from all over the state. So we're not just a New York City institution. The two counties outside of New York County that send us the most students are Suffolk County and Nassau County, but we've got students from every county in the state, so that we are providing job opportunities for all of these graduates, either in New York or elsewhere. And largely as the work of my predecessor, Marvin Feldman, we have excellent relationships with the two key chairs in the House and the Senate. Ed Sullivan, who is the chair of the Higher Education Subcommittee in the House of Representatives, the lower house of the legislature, is very high on FIT, as is Senator Ken Laval. Interestingly enough, Laval is a Republican and Sullivan is a Democrat. So the issue is bipartisan in terms of what this college does, and everybody recognizes what it does. And they don't mess with us in the legislature because they run into these people who understand the college and have been very supportive.
You've touched along many dimensions of the college. Is there something else you'd like to add?
Well, there is another characteristic of the college that you might draw upon that you really feel it when you come here. It's a very special place. There is a sense of community, of being part of a family, of being committed to students, and of being committed to a particular approach to education that is unusual and unique. And I really experienced that when I was coming down for the interviews from Boston University. I won't say anything on tape about the president of Boston University, but the environment at Boston University is not a happy environment. Here, when one walks in here, it's a happy place. And I'm constantly being told by visitors and others what a happy place it is and how pleased they are with the kind of treatment that they receive from our staff and others. People try to be helpful. And that makes it very special and is probably one of the most important things I like about the college. But the thing that really exhilarates me more than anything else is what happens in May, and that's when all the students' projects are due. And this is very different from the traditional college because you get to see the fruits of their labor and their creativity right away. And it is amazing, whether they're in business and technology or whether they're in advertising or in design, what they produce and the skill and the creativity that they demonstrate. And I have one story with which I'd like to close because I think this is a classic illustration of how the college functions. Sandy is my wife. We were not married when we originally came down here. She was my fiancée. And we'd scheduled our wedding for January 2nd of the first 6 months that we were here. And we were greeting students in the cafeteria. Being introduced to them was probably November. And one of the students I introduced to my fiancée, Sandy, he said, "Oh, when is the wedding?" And she said, "January 2nd. And he said, "Well, is anyone doing your gown yet?" And she said no. Immediately she thought, a student. And he said, "I'd love to do your gown." Well, she kind of finessed that and didn't answer. Now, this young fellow was just what you would expect, scraggly, torn, poor as a church mouse. Came the end of the semester in May, he won the major prize in the fashion design department, designed an exquisite dress, and before that day was over, had a job with his own line and his name on it, designing dresses for a bridal house. And this year he came back for Parents' Day. And the kid who had been in his scraggly jeans is now dressed in a Saks Fifth Avenue suit. And the parents asked him, "Well, how are you doing?" And he said, "I'll tell you how I'm doing. This suit that I have on cost more than my tuition at FIT last year." And my wife has been kicking herself ever since. And I think that story illustrates more about FIT than anything that you could write in a book or say anything else.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.